first AFA Convention presentation. I'm going to talk about high and low issues, and I'm going to talk about performance, but we'll get to that because I'm going to talk more about the idea of high-low issues, high-low issues. Asymmetry, high-low, whatever you want to call it. It's I think we have a lot of difficulty understanding it and relating to it because it's we're bipeds, and it's a little different issue when you start dealing with quadrupeds, but it's there and it's not restricted to equines. Asymmetry in and of itself is the issue, and it's the lack of proportion between the parts of the thing. And I think that we've all seen this, that asymmetry, lack of proportion. Is this something that I see almost daily, and I actually see it quite often in this presentation, where the left foot is what I refer to as the dominant limb, and it will be the broader, more rounded, fuller hoof that has the crushed heel, the running forward appearance, and while the high side or the steep side will be on the right. It's not always the case, but in my experience, I find that it runs about 70%. That the low side is on the left, the high side is the right. So, and you'll see that from the lateral view, you see a similar appearance. You'll see the heels run forward on that low foot, the dominant side. You'll see them stacked up on the steep foot, and in the shod foot, which is the top row, you'll see that it takes on a little different appearance than it does in the barefoot. In the barefoot, they will tend to dub that toe off on that steep foot, and they'll break the toe off, dub it off, and they have a completely different look than when we keep it shod and protect it. In the process of protecting the foot, we very often overprotect it. And the longer the cycle, the more that becomes apparent. So you'll get a little bullnosing on the low foot, you'll get a little dishing on the high foot. It's pretty obvious what happens to that low foot. We see that heel crush, we see it run under, we see it take a lot of stress. It's just obvious to us. What happens on the high side is not necessarily so obvious. Basically what's happening is we're seeing capsular damage on that low foot, and like I say, it's obvious. But when we go to that high foot, it's not so obvious until we start looking inside it. And then we see that we've got pedal osteitis issues, and it's torturing the anterior portion of that foot as much as it's torturing the posterior portion of the other side. This has been called a grazing stance by a number of people. What you will find is that whether it's grazing or otherwise, when a horse is in a static mode, you're going to get the low foot forward and the high foot back. And that's almost always the preferred stance, will be to have the low foot forward, the high foot back. You'll see it when they're grazing, you'll see it when they're standing at a feeder, you'll see it in any number of situations. And there you can see it again. and you can see the disparity or the difference in the capsules on those two limbs. And there's the normal appearance that we find, where you've got the low side and the high side. In this case, it does hold to what I was talking about, with the norm being the left fore being the low foot. And I call that the dominant limb. If you go to the literature, you'll find that some people will look at it just the opposite. If you read and some of the best discussions that you find on this are Dr. Kerry Ridgway, and he refers to the steep side as the dominant side. So Dr. Tim Fleck refers to it as the dominant side being the low side. So it varies depending on how people look at it, but it's very, very much that you have the disparity in that foot. And radiographically, it's pretty obvious. You're going to usually find the same thing where you've got a lower palmar angle, a zero palmar angle, or sometimes even a negative palmar angle on that low side, and you'll have it kicked up on the steep side. So that holds true pretty regularly. And then you get limb length disparity thrown into it, where Esco Buff and others will talk about it as a difference in the limb length and the disparity in the limb length. I don't see it as that so much. I see it as loading characteristics, and most importantly, mostly what I see is a postural adaptation or postural choice. And I find the same thing in myself and other people. I feel like that when I'm standing here right now, that my shoulders are level and perfect. I know that from looking in the mirror and from April telling me constantly that I'm actually dropped on one side, and that's just, it feels normal to me, but it's not. I also know that if I get into a relaxed conversational posture, I will do this. And I will put my left leg forward and my right leg back, and I will stand and I will talk to you all day like that. Yet if I do the opposite and put this foot forward, I start getting nervous. I can't do it. I can't hold this posture. And it makes me uncomfortable. And I switch back. So I've got that relationship between my hips and my shoulders is there. And it holds true in these horses. And so you have a preferred posture. Where does this come from? I can't tell you. I can tell you that it's been attributed to genetics, to injuries, to conditioning, to grazing stance, to long leg, short neck conformation, any number of things that it's attributed to, but to actually determine why it is, I don't know. Simon Curtis talks about it and says it's that it is not a club-footed condition, that it's not something that's congenital, that it's something that's acquired. Tim Fleck talks about it that way. Mikey Van Heel talks about it as long leg, short neck, and that it's something that they're born into and that they're going to be that way. I do think no matter what causes it, that we exaggerate. And if you go and you watch, I just did some casual observations at my barns last year, and I watched, and they almost every barn I'm in the English barns, so they're using mounting blocks. Almost every barn was set up where they left the mounting block to the left, and then went on the left lead away from the mounting block. Almost everything that they did from their left side. And it's interesting how much we sort of exaggerate and exacerbate these conditions. So, the characteristics of the steep foot. The steep foot of a non-dominant limb, you get toe flare, you get dish, you often get toe crack, you get anterior bruising from, usually you'll often see that little halo around the coffin bone. You'll often see that yellowish look to the anterior portion of that foot where I identify that as chronic bruising and kind of yellowish haze that we find. And you'll get a contracted heel, you'll get a hooky heel, I call it a eagle's beak or a hawk's beak, that little hook that comes in right at the buttress. You get very often a recessive thrushy frog. It's very often you'll get thrush in that foot, but not in the others. It's often recessive and you get very little ground contact. And if they're going to pull a shoe, they're going to pull it on that steep foot. That's almost always the case. And somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, Fluffy lost his shoe." I said, "Right front?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" It's just, that's where they're going to pull it. And there's, in terms of performance, there's an unwillingness on that lead. They don't want to stay on that lead. They don't want to swap to that lead. They're very happy to swap away from it. So, and you can watch these horses go. Let me go to the next slide. We'll talk about the other foot, and then I'll talk about the way they go. The low foot, on the other hand, you've got the bullnose dorsal wall. You've got a crushed or underrun heel. You've got just the opposite of, you have the posterior bruising in the caudal aspect of the foot. You very often have a broad bulbous frog. Some people refer to it as a prolapsed frog. And you'll have collapsed bars. You'll very often see those bars running a lap. And we'll go back to the diagram and look at that. And then that is almost always their preferred or lead or dominant lead. And so when you compare these from left to right, you've got almost diametrically opposed feet that we're calling a pair, and they're not a pair. So in terms of performance, what you get is you get an unwillingness to take a lead. You get, they don't want to, if they're left front dominant, that's their low side, they want to take that side, they're more resistant going on the high side. They'll, if someone's doing lead changes, they'll make a smooth flowing transition into that left lead, and then they'll skip and hop into the right lead. So it becomes a huge issue for dressage where you're doing tempi changes, and you've got 6 lead changes in a row or 9 lead changes in a row, and they're smooth and fluid going away from the high side, and they're choppy and jumpy going into it. So that's a big deal. The loss of suppleness on that lead is a big deal as well, where you'll see these horses and cantering on the strong side, they're going to be supple and strong, and they may seem a little chargy and heavy on the forehand, but they're strong and fluid and smooth. You get on that high side, and they look like their head goes up a little bit, they seem rougher and choppier, they want to fall in on you, they'll actually, they'll almost fishtail around the corners. And so that's, it's like riding a 2x4 around the corner, where they just, like, or a dirt bike. You know, it's just you skid around that corner instead of going fluid. You see the same thing on a lead, on a lunch line. It's not just a rider-related issue. You put these horses on a lunch line, you put them on that strong side, and they're out there at the end of that lunge, and they're pulling on them, and they're staying out there. You put them on the weak side, on the steep side, and they fall into it, and you have to have that lunge whip to keep them going out and going away from you, because they're falling into you on that circle. And so it's very, very much a performance issue. And if you look at the training scale and look at what trainers and riders are looking at, they're looking at rhythm, suppleness, contact, impulsion, straightness, and collection. And if you think about that in terms of what we do, this is really interesting scale. We get blamed when Daisy goes out and pulls a shoe off in the fence. But we don't get blamed when Daisy can't make it from second level dressage work to third level dressage work. It's because, well, you know, maybe she just needs to go be an examiner. She's just not cut out for dressage. She doesn't have the mindset for it. Any number of things that don't get blamed on us. But if you think about it, what we're doing affects rhythm and suppleness and impulsion and straightness and even collection. So there's only one step here on this pyramid that we're left out of, and that's contact and connection. And everything else we're influencing. And I think that it's very important for us to look at that scale and recognize and try to help our clients understand that no, it's not our fault when Daisy goes out and pulls her shoe off on the fence, but maybe I can do something to help with the straightness issue. Hardest thing in the world to do is to get a horse to go in a straight line. That's when you know that broke is when you can ride them off in a straight line. So it's, I think it's a huge part of what we do. But in terms of performance, we're playing on this scale as much as the trainers are. And it's not just at the feet that we see this. What we see in these horses is going all the way, you know, it's at the top as well as the bottom. And I don't know whether it's chicken or egg. I don't know whether it starts at the top or whether it starts at the bottom. But I know that part of what exaggerates the issue is that the horse doesn't have a clavicle or a collarbone. And Doug was talking about that as unbolted or in the front end. And I think that that's very important for us to recognize that, I can't remember how he said it, but he was talking about they were bolted together in the hind end and not bolted in the front end. And that where they're unbolted is that they don't have that clavicle or collarbone to act as a strut. They have a thoracic swing. And I don't know if it acts, if you think about it, the collarbone is basically a fuse. It's designed to blow, break, so that your shoulder doesn't. It's a fuse. But, so that collarbone not being there allows for fluid movement and supple movement, but it also allows for structural weaknesses. And so if you look at that in terms of musculature, we've got two very important muscles there that are connecting in. And I think that it's that thoracic trap is the one that's important for us. And that's basically sitting right where that saddle is going to come in. And behind and below that, you've got your latissimus dorsi. And so those are your basic shoulder muscles that are coming into play here. And if you look down if you stand at the croup and look down these horses, what you see is you'll see that on the dominant or low side limb, you've got a bulging area there at the wither. And if you look on the steep side, it's slabby and flat. And you can go down the croup and look, and it'll match up that way on all of these horses. And people say, oh, well, he's really overdeveloped in his muscles on that low side foot. And they're traps. They're not biceps. They don't bulge. They're trapezius muscles, and they're flat. They're not bulging, bulky muscles. So I don't know that you're looking at an overdevelopment here so much as you're looking at postural issues. And so, again, there's looking down the back, you see that disparity. So if you look at it, and this is a saddle flare, and these horses make saddle flares lots of money. They are wonderful for saddle flares. They're wonderful for body workers because they don't stay the same. And when I shoe one, that shoulder level will change, and during the course of the cycle, it goes back where it was. And so it depends on when the saddle fitter shows up, what needs to be done. If the saddle fitter shows up at the beginning of the cycle, there's a minor adjustment. If the saddle fitter shows up at the end of the cycle, there's a major adjustment. But somehow me and the saddle fitter aren't working together any more than me and the chiro and the massage therapist or the vet are working together. But I think these horses need a team because I'm going to talk, as I go, I'll talk more about the maintenance, but I consider this a maintenance issue. You don't fix these horses, you try to maintain them. So they make saddle fitters lots of money. So shoeing and trimming approaches. I was trained to match pairs. I was taught to match pairs. That was what I did. And I did perimeter fit. I matched my pairs. I put them on an ankle gauge. And I made them both 55 degrees if I could. That was what I was taught to do. And to do that with a pair of mismatched, asymmetrical feet, I got to make the big one smaller, or make the small one bigger, or both. And I've got to still maintain my perimeter fit. And in some cases, because I was doing a lot of long foot courses when I started out, I used acrylic and fillers to make them look like they matched if I could make them come together. So then from there, I started wedging the low foot, and I think I still do that on occasion, depending on the horse, but that was the only thing that I needed to do, was to try to wedge that low foot and make it more normal. The wetter environments that I started working in said, no, you can't get away with that, because I simply crushed it further. But I would wedge the low foot, and I think a lot of people still do that. And then I switched over and started just being a foot shoer. I was playing the whole game, I was shoeing the whole horse, but I found that I needed to, if I didn't have pairs, I needed to shoe feet. And so I started shoeing the individual feet, playing with center of rotation, duckets, dots, so on and so forth, EOPO systems, various ways of mapping the feet. And so mapping and shoeing the feet rather than shoeing pairs. And I don't care what map you use. I'm old school. I typically use Duckett's dot and Duckett's bridge, but there are multiple ways of mapping and looking at feet, and Duckett's dots, again, what I usually do. But the important thing is when you look back at this original drawing that I put up, is that there are some very significant differences in these feet. And besides the fact that one is narrow and one is full. Remember I said that you had a recessive frog in the steep side. It's not only recessive, but it's there's a whole lot of mass in front of it on that you don't see on that low foot. And if you look at the bars, look at how the bars on the low side foot are running laterally, and the seat of the corn has moved forward, and your heels are actually functioning up near the heel cord, instead of back at the buttress of the foot. Whereas on the high side, you've got straight, strong bars that are coming back and they're running pretty true. So basically what it ends up is that, and I think, you look at all the different ways that we differ and we argue about things amongst ourselves. And, well, I do it this way and I do it that way. And I follow this school and I follow that school. And when you break it down and really get it down, I think the main differences among Farriers is that you have one group that fits feet, and you have another group that places shoes. That's really the big difference. That's the real main difference amongst us. Is some people fit feet, and some people place shoes. And what I do in these horses is I fit one and I place the other. Because to get my breakover and my proportions right, I have to pull that foot back on that steep side, on the high foot. As much as, and it's so counterintuitive for me, I struggled and fought against it because it's already a small foot. It's already a half a size smaller. And now I'm saying, well, I'm going to pull it back. And I end up putting a smaller shoe on it. And if you're making a handmade, you don't think as much about it. You make one, you cut 13 1/4, and then you cut 13. And you don't think anything about it. But if you're pulling them off of the rack and one says 2 and one says 1, you say, ooh, that's not right. Or if one says 2 and one says 0, you say, ooh, that's really not right. So you start trying to figure out how to deal with it. But the bottom line is that if you're working out proportions and adjusting these feet, you very often will be using different size shoes. And I disguise that a lot. I will very often pull out a number 1 front and a number 1 hind. And I'll reshape that hind so they'll have the same numbers on it. But I'm still putting on a smaller shoe. And I'm still I'm making that adjustment. So when I take and put that breakover back on this steep foot, If I move that back a quarter of an inch on that foot, that's also my general rule of thumb or my guideline as to how much more heel I can take off of that foot. However much I come back from the front, I can take off from the back. So if I'm trimming that foot and I look and I've got my proportions there where I've got, say I'm using Duckett's dot and I'm going to set to a 50-50 ratio, then I set that shoe there and I know I'm going to come back a quarter of an inch. I can take another quarter of an inch of heel off without bringing that horse up and raising it up at the heels. So, and after about 2 or 3 cycles, it starts to look more normal. Very often I'll be able to go up a little bit in my shoe size, and a large part of it is because what you're doing is you're getting that horse to come in and start utilizing that steep side foot. And when he starts utilizing that steep side, he's no longer torturing the low side. Because that's what, think about the fact that these horses are, we know that a horse is going to be heavy on the forehand. He's designed to be heavy on the forehand. It's the reason it doesn't look like Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's the way we want them to look. So they'll get down and use their hind end. But the idea is that they're just flat out designed to be heavy on the forehand. And they're carrying 60 to 65% of the weight on the front portion. If we look at that and they're carrying 60 to 65% of that on one limb, and they start torturing and tearing apart the capsule, the plastic element of that limb. So the more we can get them to utilize and work and balance out and be more symmetrical in function of that steep side, the less they're going to torture the low side. And so I get it set back, they start taking the stress off of that low side and then get recovery in the caudal aspect of their low foot. So again, I typically use Duckett's dot when I'm doing this. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you have some systematic approach that you're using for getting your feet to work together, and a mapping system that allows you to do that. Now, the other element to this is that we all look at these and say, and I've talked this whole time about front limbs. And the bottom line is these horses work on diagonals, and if you've got a disparity in your right and left in the front, you've got a diagonal disparity on the hind. And it's just not as obvious, it's not going to jump at you as much, but the same adjustments that you're making in the front, you've got to make diagonally behind. And when you start measuring and looking and evaluating these horses, you'll see that your breakovers run forward, your heels are a little crushed more on that diagonal hind. So you can't forget to pay attention to the hinds. Credits. I owe so much to so many people, everything I know. But in this respect, the people that I've read and worked with and studied on this, Simon Curtis is a great resource. His new book, The Hoof of the Horse, covers this in some detail, more so than you'll find in the general textbooks. Dr. Tim Fleck, absolute genius, veterinarian in Noblesville, Indiana, has studied this for many years, and I've had the opportunity to work with him. Tony Gonzalez spoke here in 1980 It was my first introduction to this idea. Tony lifted feet and did flat wedging or flat lifting with rim pads. I thought he was going to get taken out of the Albuquerque Convention, tarred and feathered for the things that he said, but they have held true, and I've learned a tremendous amount from following what Tony started. And I've been studying this and flirting with it since I first listened to him. Susan Harris, Susan wrote this book at the bottom, Horse Gaits, Balance and Movement. I think it's one of the greatest books that you'll ever find on horseshoeing, and it doesn't have the one little tiny chapter at the back on shoeing that is very basic. But you will find more information in there about phases of stride and movement and what horses do. That it was an eye-opening book for me. Dr. Mikey Van Heel, who has done considerable studies. I don't agree a whole lot, but I learned a lot and disagree. And then Dr. Kerry Ridgway, who recently passed and was a veterinarian, chiropractor, general genius. And again, he uses different terminology than I do, but it's the same information, he's just viewing it differently. I think it's very, very cool stuff. So, and I didn't do enough in terms of talking about what Tony Gonzalez does and did. The whole idea is, and that falls into the limb length disparity, and there are a lot of people who have continued with Tony's work. But again, it's postural, where Tony looks at it and says, you know, this limb is shorter and you need to lift it. And you put a flat pad or a rim pad on that steep side foot, and all of a sudden those shoulders that are here start coming here and coming into a balance. And I did that method for a number of years. But what I find is that it's difficult to address the changes that happen when you're using that approach. And Dr. Tim Fleck. What Dr. Fleck says, and this is where I am with this now. If you talked to me last year, I would have said it differently. If you talked to me the year before, I would have said it differently. I hope to God that I've grown and expanded and will tell you something different next year. But what Fleck says, and what I really believe, is that this is a scapular disparity. Just as I talked about this comfort zone of my stance, that's postural. And for me, it's coming at the pelvis. On a quadruped, it's coming at the scapula. But if you think about it, they're basically multi-pelvic animals. They have the true pelvis in the back, but that shoulder and wither area is functioning as a pelvis. So you've got a drive pelvis behind and a support pelvis up front. And that's what's happening with these animals. So that disparity here is no different. It's still coming from a pelvis. It's just not what we typically call or think of as a pelvis. And when I do this, I'm rotating my pelvis. If you look at these horses, that scapular difference or muscular difference that's coming that we see in those traps, trapezoid muscles, is a rotation of that scapula. And again, Doug talked in his talk about abduction versus adduction. Okay, in these horses, what you get is you get a rotation of the scapula And that low side is rotated forward and it bulges up. And so with that limb, because you've got an abduction there, and it's abducted, when that horse swings and strides, he's got a free motion and he comes forward and you get extension. On the other side, you've got that scapula is abducted. It's back. And so when it comes forward, there's a restriction. And horses do not understand the idea of working through pain. They want to work around pain. So when he hits that restriction, he says, ooh, and he raises up. So you've got extension with one limb, elevation with the other. And in terms of performance, what happens is you get really good riders and they cover it up. And that horse looks so much more even than he really is because you've got a rider that just automatically falls into it. My wife is one of the most beautiful riders in the world, and part of the reason is that when she gets on a horse, she rides completely differently according to what that horse does. So you put her on a high-low horse, and she sits on that low-side lead, and that horse is strong and supple, and she sits down, and she drops in and she rides him. And then she goes to the high side lead where he's choppy, and his head's up a little bit, and he's wanting to fall out, and she half-seats him. And she does it so automatically that she doesn't even realize that she's doing it. But he looks similar going those other ways. You put somebody else on that horse, and they try to sit down and drive him through on that high side lead, he'll just swap out. So it's very much that they are two different animals going this way versus going that way. And if you ride them as if you're riding two different horses, you're cool. It works. Another element to that is the idea that horse is choosing that side because he can drive harder off of that diagonal. And that's an important part, again, that brings you back where this is not a front end only issue. And for the first several years that I worked with this, after Tony got me started on it, I was convinced that it was all front end. And no, it's front end and high end. So, one other way of thinking of this is if you box or you watch a boxer, what you see is the boxer will set up to jab, and he'll jab, and his other side is set up to swing and to hit a roundhouse. Once you're set up to jab, you're not going to come around and roundhouse. You can't do it. You've set your body, you've set your posture to jab. And you have to change your footwork to be able to swing. That's what these horses are doing. They are posturally set up to jab on the high side and to roundhouse on the low side. And that setup drives what they do. So we're trying to free up that occlusion that keeps them in that sideways position or altered position that makes them short on one side, longer on the other. I'll shut up and let you ask questions. If I can't answer them, it'll be a stupid question. Yes, sir. You know, it depends. If you're asking them to change everything they do, the question, what Lucas was asking is, do I ask the owners or trainers to work with the horse to work on and try to develop musculature on the weak side? And I think that, first of all, the most important thing, and something I didn't mention it's connected to the age of the horse. I mean, if I've got a 2-year-old that's starting out under saddle, I've got a whole different world to work with than I do if I've got a 20-year-old. And you know, if I've got an older aged horse, I'm gonna have to live with what I got. And I can try to make it more comfortable, but it is what it is. But I try to encourage my owners to recognize that they are exaggerating the condition. And I talk to them about the fact that, you know, you just spent 70% of that lunge work going to the left. Can you help me out? And try to do something more balanced. But you know, I'm not going to try to get people to go in and start mounting from the offside or something like that. You're not going to change their practices. But I do try very hard to encourage them to recognize what they're doing. And I think, you know, a lot of my practices with dressage, and 72% of my work last year was dressage. So you can ask a dressage owner to do anything they do. If I were still shooting reining horses, I'd give up. But you know, you tell a dressage owner to paint lemon oil on the left ear, and they'll say, "Oh, okay. I like that." Yeah. The question is whether I'm padding up to deal with concavity and solar depth. And I do not find that to be the case. I find that I have more concavity in my steep side foot on almost all of these horses. I don't pad them up for any reason except when I have something that's really exaggerated. I may pad up the steep side foot for the first cycle or something, just to try to gain something. And I find most of these horses will respond to adjusting your shoe positioning and your breakover positioning, and of course, you know, it's in the trim as well, because the minute you make your decision, you're going to pull that shoe back on that steep foot. That also says I can take heel off, and but when I find that they'll respond fairly quickly. Every once in a while, I'll get one where I'll violate my own general rules of thumb. I had one last month that the owner bought it. She had a big show the following week, and I wedged up the low foot. It worked. For a long term, I wouldn't have done it. But for the short term, you know, I had 3 days. I wasn't going to make the radical change in shoe placement, so I wedged up the low foot, and I'll go back to my normal approach next time. Yes. You'll have to hit me again. I'm partially deaf here, but the anecdotal. I think anecdotal information is going to be with us in this trade forever, because research requires control of variables. And we've got so many variables that we can't even identify, much less control. So research in our field is always going to be problematic. We can't go into a lab and turn off this variable and turn on that variable. We can't even identify the variables because we've got owners and riders and tack and footing. And so I think that anecdotal evidence has to be something that we live with. Whether it's verifiable and trustworthy, I don't know. It is what it is. And, but, you know, part of what works is, can you repeat it? And whether that's based off of anecdotal evidence or off of laboratory research, it has to be repeated. And I think that's where we come in and do the repetition and see if it works. And, but, you know, I mean, with this situation, we can't even identify for sure the variables that are at play. I know that I grew up on a ranch where we had more than 400 horses at any given time. And those horses were born in a pasture and they were raised in a pasture. And I didn't see high-low horses there. I saw, you know, now I can go back, now that I'm tuned into it, I'm sure I can go back and identify the high side and the low side, but it'd still be subtle compared to what I see in my daily work. So I think there's a nutritional element that is a huge factor here. I think there's an environmental adaptation that comes into play. Those babies that are out there in those pastures, you get an aggressive colt, and he's out there and he's going to nurse from the right side or the left side or the back or wherever he wants to. And that mare says, okay. You put that same mare in a confined, limited area, in a confined space, and she's going to get into her natural, chosen, comfortable, postural position and force that baby to mirror her. And she has control. So, I don't know, nutrition, whatever it is. Yes, sir.
Well, a couple of things. One is I have a theory that I discussed with a friend of mine about the high-low and why horses that are out in pasture have less of it than horses that are installed. I think horses are, like us, left-sided and right-handed and left.
Absolutely, they're sided just as we're handed.
And a horse in a pasture takes a step, eats some grass, takes another step, and then the feet keep shifting back and forth. And of course, there's always one foot that's back and one than the other. A horse that's in a stall doesn't have to do that, so we'll always put the high foot back. This is my personal theory. It's what I call horseshoeing. There's facts and there's personal opinion.
Yep.
And then the other thing, I love that system of you can judge how much heel it takes off by how far you bring the toe back. Never heard that before. It's a great way to do on that. But my question is, a lot of those high feet have a severe ditch in the toe, dorsal toe. Do you take that into consideration?
Oh, absolutely. The question is, they'll have a dish in that high side foot, and do I take that into consideration? And very often, I mean, for years I would see a dished foot, and I'd start trimming the bottom of that foot, and then I'd go back to the top, and I'd run out of foot, and all of a sudden I've got a mess. I find that a lot, I look at that dish and that tells me how much foot I've got to work with in a lot of cases. And what I find is that, like I say, I used to pad up that steep side, that high side foot. I find now that I will leave it a little long when I trim because I'm losing foot there. And I think that the reason so many of us end up padding and lifting that high side is because we cut too much off of the bottom of it to begin with. And if we'll measure these feet before we start, we'll usually find that is a shorter foot at the very beginning. Well, and you have to work around your dish to get your measurement. But when you can't run down the dorsal wall, you have to run down the toe quarters. But when you start looking at that foot from the very beginning, before you ever take the nippers to it, it'll be an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/4 of an inch shorter already. And then it has more concavity in it, so it encourages us to trim it more from the bottom. And all of a sudden, we've exaggerated something that was already a problem. So yeah, I think you've got to take that dish into consideration. You've got to take it and work with it. Lloyd.
Well, he actually touched on what I was going to ask about small hand horses that young age. You feel that that's got some, you see, real on the ring, and they just kind of, they like being a horse for the first few years of their life. Now, it's fine.
You get them in confinement, and I think that especially if they've got a mare in there with them that they're nursing, that mare will adopt her comfort stance. They have to mirror that to nurse. And so I think it becomes I think it's an acquired issue to begin with, and I think it becomes exaggerated in confinement. And I think that confinement also gets tied into nutrient intake, and that plays a big role, and growth rate plays a big role in causing it to be exaggerated. Yes, sir? Exactly. I have not read that material, but you're going to get me after this and teach me. That. Yeah, and I would appreciate it very much if you'd catch me after we're done. Give me that source. I'd like to look at it. But I do think it's very much an issue of, we don't even know if people are hardwired to be right-handed or left-handed. But the acquisition and the development of a congenital trait, if it is congenital, we don't need to exaggerate it or make it worse. And we don't need to put them in a situation where others, it's like, we say don't exercise that horse, and they turn him out with a dominant horse that exercises him. And we didn't do it, but we put him out with one that would. And we need to be more aware and control those situations as much as we can. Other questions? Yes, sir. think we can fix this. I think we can maintain it. And one of the things that you'll find on these horses is that, especially in performance situations, you're going to need to short cycle. You know, I mean, one of the things that I do with all of my performance horses, I watch and I talk to my trainers, and I know which ones go better at the beginning of the cycle and which ones go better at the end of the cycle. And with these horses, they will always do better at the beginning of the cycle, and they will deteriorate at the end of the cycle. And so if you're in a performance situation with a high-level horse, you may find that you're shoeing him on a 4-week cycle or sometimes on a 3-week cycle during show season, because you're trying to keep that distortion and disparity to a minimum. And during the course of the cycle, that low foot's going to get lower and that high foot's going to get higher. And so I'm very much trying to work these horses so that my shows are coming at the beginning of the cycle. And if I've got an important show coming up, I'm going to short cycle that horse to get it optimal for that performance. As far as my general protocol, yes, my general protocol is to map the feet, and that in general I end up doing pretty much a perimeter fit on my low foot, and I'll do a setback on my high foot. And after I've done that for about 2 or 3 cycles, they start looking more normal and it doesn't look artificial. But man, the first cycle, sometimes it looks like hammering dog food. You know, it's just, you look at it and say, what was he thinking? Did 2 different people shoe this horse? Well, 2 different mindsets did. It was one person who's bipolar.
Okay,
Yes.
hold on. This could have to be the last question because we've got to wrap up in this room. So I apologize to the audience for that. I'm sure you can catch Mr. Chow outside the hall.
You can catch me anywhere, I'm slow.
When you said that there's a scapular area, does that indicate the bone itself?
Absolutely not. No, the scapular disparity is simply posture. And if you look at the scapular placement on these horses, it's just like, it's just like if I'm standing here like this, my scapular patterns are completely different. But radiographically, they're the same. And so it's the muscle, tendon, ligament holding things in place. And I have a preferred place that I want to hold. And when I stand like this, all of my ligaments and muscles say, thank you. And when I do this, they say, you've been drinking too much.
I'm a little keep-on.
What's that?
They say I'm a little keep-on.
You bet.
Thank you
Thank you
so